Let's do some more complex translations, this time from QL into English, still working with the same QL language as before. We'll start with for all x, for all y, fxy. There are a few different ways to come up with the English translation for a more complex formula. One strategy I like is first considering a formula that's one level less abstract than the one that you're ultimately trying to translate. So take for all x, for all y, fxy, and then generate what we call an instance of that formula by removing the initial for all x quantifier and then substituting in a proper name like j for x. That gives us for all y, fjy. That we can translate easily. Assuming that j refers to James, it says that James is friends with everyone. Now, for all x, for all y, fxy just takes what that previous formula says about James, which is that he is friends with everyone, and says that everyone is like that. So for all x, for all y, fxy says that everyone is friends with everyone. Next, for all x, there exists a y such that ty and fxy. Once again, it's helpful to first consider a formula that is one level less abstract. So let's again consider the formula that we get by removing the initial for all x quantifier and substituting j in for x. That gives us there exists a y such that ty and fjy. In other words, there exists a y such that y is a toddler and James is friends with y. That is, there is a toddler that James is friends with. Now, the formula for all x, there exists a y such that ty and fxy just takes what the previous formula says about James, which is that there is a toddler that he's friends with, and then claims that everyone is like James in that respect. So, for all x, there exists a y such that ty and fxy says that everyone is such that there's a toddler that they're friends with. Or, phrased into more natural English, everyone is friends with some toddler or other. Next, let's look at there exists a y such that for all x, ty and fxy. This is the same as the last example, except that we have reversed the order of the quantifiers. Does that make a difference to the translation? Well, let's see. To translate this formula, let's start by using the same tactic of making it one level less abstract. So let's remove the initial there exists a y quantifier and replace all the remaining occurrences of y with a name like j. That gives us for all x, tj and fxj. What does that say? Maybe this one's straightforward enough to just give the translation right away, but for the sake of practice, let's again use the strategy of making our target formula one level less abstract. So let's now remove the initial for all x quantifier and substitute a name in for x. Let's use n as the name. That gives us tj and fnj. Assuming that j refers to James and that n refers to Naveen, this says that James is a toddler and Naveen is friends with him. Now let's work backwards to the more complex formulas, starting with for all x, tj and fxj. This formula takes what the previous one says about Naveen, which is that James is a toddler and he, Naveen, is friends with him, and it says that everyone is like Naveen in that respect. So that formula says that everyone is such that James is a toddler and they are friends with him. In other words, it says that James is a toddler and everyone is friends with him. Now, the formula there exists a y, such that for all x, ty and fxy, takes what the previous formula says about James, which is that he's a toddler that everyone is friends with, and it says that there's at least someone who is like James in that respect. So it says that there's at least someone who's a toddler that everyone is friends with. That's different from what the formula for all x, there is a y, such that ty and fxy says, which is that everyone is friends with some toddler or other. To cement the difference in your mind, imagine a scenario where there are just 6 individuals and 3 of them are toddlers. Now, suppose that just the first 2 individuals are friends with the first toddler, just the second 2 individuals are friends with the second toddler, and just the final two individuals are friends with the third toddler. In that scenario, everyone is friends with some toddler or other, so the formula for all x there is a y such that ty and fxy is true in that scenario. But there's no toddler that everyone is friends with. For each toddler, there are only 2 people out of a possible 6 that are friends with them. So the formula, there exists a y such that for all x, ty and fxy is false in that scenario. Next, let's do there is an x such that it's not the case that for all y, if ty, then fxy. If we make this formula one level less abstract, removing the initial existential quantifier and substituting a name in for x, we get it's not the case that for all y, if ty, then fjy. So let's start there. We have the negation of for all y, if ty, then fjy. When you're trying to translate the negation of a formula, it often helps to just first translate the formula that is being negated, and then ask yourself what it would mean to simply deny that. So let's first translate for all y, if ty, then fjy. That says that for each thing y, if y is a toddler, then James is friends with y. In other words, James is friends with every toddler. So the negation of for all y, if ty, then fjy, just denies that James is friends with every toddler. So one natural way of capturing what is expressed by not for all y, if ty, then fjy, would be to write James is not friends with every toddler. But here we have to be a bit careful because that way of putting things is actually ambiguous. The statement James is not friends with every toddler could also be heard as saying that every toddler is such that James is not friends with them. In other words, it could be heard as saying that James is not friends with any toddlers at all. And that's not the idea that we're trying to express. We just want to deny the claim that he's friends with absolutely every toddler, not assert that he's friends with none of them. So it would be better to paraphrase not for all y, if ty, then fjy, as it isn't true that James is friends with every toddler. Now, the formula there is an x such that it's not the case that for all y, if ty, then fxy, takes what the previous formula says about James, that it's not the case that he's friends with every toddler, and it says that there's at least someone that is like James in that respect. So there is an x such that it's not the case that for all y, if ty, then fxy, says there is someone for whom it isn't true that they are friends with every toddler. Next, let's tackle for all x, if px, then it's not the case that there exists a y such that ty and nxy. Let's try doing this one without using the tactic of first making the formula one level less abstract, although you could certainly do that here if you wanted to. Let's just try paraphrasing it into English in stages. So as a start, the formula is saying, for all x, if x likes pizza, then something somewhat complicated. It's not the case that there exists a y such that ty and nxy. But let's not worry yet about exactly what that somewhat complicated part is saying. Let's just notice the basic structure of the formula. It's saying that for all x, if x likes pizza, then x meets some further, somewhat complicated condition. So we're going to be able to see this formula as saying everyone who likes pizza is such that ... where what goes in the blank is the further condition that the formula is saying is met by anyone who likes pizza. So now we deal with the part of the formula that we put aside earlier. Here we have the negation of there exists a y such that ty and nxy. So let's start with the formula that's being negated. That says there is a y such that y is a toddler and such that x is neighbors with y. In other words, the formula being negated says there is a toddler that x is neighbors with. So it's not the case that there exists a y such that ty and nxy just denies that there's a toddler that x is neighbors with. In other words, it says there is no toddler that x is neighbors with. So overall, the formula says for all x, if x likes pizza, then there's no toddler that x is neighbors with. In other words, everyone who likes pizza is such that there's no toddler that they are neighbors with. Or, a bit more naturally, anyone who likes pizza has no neighbors that are toddlers. Finally, let's do for all x, for all y, if fxy, then fyx. Here, let's proceed by making the formula one level less abstract. Removing the initial for all x quantifier and then replacing all occurrences of x with a name, like j, gives us for all y, if fjy, then fyj. Now we need to figure out what that formula says about James. It says that for each y, if James is friends with y, then y is friends with James. In other words, if James is friends with a person, then they are friends with him. Now the formula for all x, for all y, if fxy, then fyx, just takes what the previous formula says about James, that if he's friends with a person, then they are friends with him in return, and it says that everyone is like that. So it says that everyone is such that when they are friends with a person, that person is then friends with them in return. Or, put more naturally, everyone who is friends with a person is befriended by that person in return.